Today's scripture reading is from Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 to 15, 20 to 23, Genesis chapter 41, verse 1a. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. May God bless the reading of his word.
After 2 full years, Pharaoh had a dream. There is a popular myth going around for quite some time, and if you're not careful, if you buy into the myth, it's going to cause you a great deal of harm. I'm referring to the myth of the overnight success. It's the notion that one can achieve something major all of a sudden without prior effort. And yet this is so harmful in at least 3 ways. Number one is that it creates frustration because you want fast success. And therefore, you build this timeline that's so accelerated, it's impossible to meet. And then when reality sets in, you're behind in your timetable, you get to be frustrated. You get to beat yourself up. I'm not fast enough. I'm not hardworking enough. I'm not smart enough. And because of that, you are frustrated. You feel sorry for yourself. The other thing is that it tends to demotivate you as you compare yourself with somebody whom you consider or think is an overnight success. And so that's where we get this thing about, why am I not so celebrated as that guy, or as well-traveled as that guy, or as promoted as that guy? What's wrong with me? And then you begin to feel this kind of discontent. You begin to beat yourself up. You begin to feel inferior. The last, and this is perhaps the most dangerous, is that because you want results fast, you want to take shortcuts. You go into risky behavior, usually to compromise your values, perhaps do something illegal and or immoral to your lasting ruin. But the notion of overnight success can be more subtle than you think. For example, take a look at this guy, Abraham Lincoln. You and I know him to be the 16th president of the United States. Do you know who he was before he became president? Well, take a look at this popular timeline. At age 22, he lost his job. And if you look at this timeline, I counted no less than 7 incidents where he was defeated for public office. And not only that, do you know that he failed in his business? It was a general store, and he went bankrupt because of poor sales, poor location, and terrible business partner. And he had to spend years paying off his debts. To make it even worse, his first sweetheart Anne died of typhoid fever. And he was grieving like crazy, every day going to his beloved's grave. And people think that because of his double whammy, bad business, lost romance, he went into a state of melancholy, what you and I may call nervous breakdown. And the remarkable thing is that from age 22 to age 51, that's about 30 years, he still persevered. Can you imagine years and years and years of setback, heartache, failure? He went on until he achieved, finally, U.S. presidency. Not exactly overnight success. And let's think of what would Joseph's timetable look like? Well, it would look like this. And if you've been following the sermon series, you would know that when he was sold as a slave by his own brothers, he was age 17. That's in Genesis chapter 37, verse 2. Fast forward, when he became vice pharaoh, he was age 30. Genesis chapter 41, verse 46. 13 years. Again, hardly an overnight success. And you get the feeling that this is a roller coaster ride. Imagine that he started up as a favorite son of Jacob. Then his brothers, his own flesh and blood, sold him down the river. Boom. Then, if you remember last week's sermon, he came to be in the service of Potiphar's household, worked his way up. The Lord was with him. Success. He became overall manager. Then, you know what Potiphar's wife did, right? Tried to seduce him. He resisted. And so, therefore, women, hell had no fewer than a woman scorned, framed him for rape. Boom. Went to prison. And then, after that, the Lord was with him, worked his way up, so that even though there's this jail warden, he was put in charge of the jail. Can you imagine the high trust involved, the potential of abuse, by the way? But he was faithful. Then it went like that for quite some time. It was like he was in a holding pattern, including 2 full years. Now, let's break off that for a while and imagine like this. Before the 2 full years, let's look at the situation. Remember the scripture reading. Joseph was there, going to his routine, management. By walking around, he saw the 2 guys, the chief cupbearer and the baker. Let's park the baker for a while. And he saw them dejected. What's wrong? Joseph asked. And then the 2 guys told him about their dreams. Then Joseph said, "Are not dreams belonging to God? Tell me your interpretations, please." And then he gave the interpretation. The favorable one went to the chief cupbearer. In about 3 days, you'll be restored to fair service. And now here comes something very interesting. Joseph told the cupbearer, "But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I've done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. I'm asking for political favor. Cupbearer, when you're back to Pharaoh's service, put in a good word for me and arrange an executive pardon. Yeah, executive pardon, right? And then we don't know what the cupbearer said, but I'm sure he would say, yeah, okay, I owe you, Joseph. Okay, I'm your man. Don't worry, I won't forget. Promise. And then when, let's say, 3 days later, people were singing happy birthday to Pharaoh, and Joseph saw the cupbearer being escorted out of prison, and whoa, anytime now, I'll be released. One day went by, another day. Maybe he's just looking for proper timing. Okay? Maybe the cupbearer was just, moving around, maneuvering to arrange for that pardon. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became over a year. And then what happened? The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph, but he forgot him. The ingrate. After what I've done for him, I could have just, went around my business, and I have enough problems of my own, and you two sad faces there, you stew, I don't care. Solve your own problems. No. Remember, Joseph went out of his way, showed empathy, ministered to them, and gave them the interpretation. And this is the text that he got. How dare they? And you notice that this particular kind of heartache, okay, imagine Joseph's high hopes crumbling to become deep disappointment. And it must have been like that for 2 full years. When you think about that, Joseph's dungeon was not just the brick and mortar around him. It could have been 3 metaphorical prisons. Number 1, it's the prison of obscurity. Remember, way back in Genesis chapter 37, he had grand dreams. And the dream meant that his brothers, and by extension, his parents, would bow down before him. Where are those dreams now? And if you remember, by the way, the brothers made Jacob, the father, believe that Joseph was killed by wild beasts. So he's forgotten, neglected, erased out of history. Beyond the 4 walls, he's an unknown, he's hidden, he's constrained, he's trapped. And that's where you have your struggle. Do I really matter? Do people even care I'm here? The second prison would be this, frustration. Have you ever noticed that life can be so daily? It's like a grind. You go to your job day in and day out. It's the same thing. Do this, do that, do that. You're only as good as your last achievement. Do this, do that. And there's this frustration of struggle. People are not always cooperative. There's always setback. And you think, what's the use? And Joseph will go on for his own duties day in, day out. Yeah, he's top of the jail, but it's still the same jail. He's not getting any younger. He's not getting anywhere, let alone getting free. What's the use? But the most painful of all would be the injustice. Remember, sold by his own brothers, then accused of attempted rape, and then forgotten by the cupbearer. And you cry out, where's the justice? Life is so unfair. I thought God's going to look after you, but I'm still here in this particular hole. And this is where you have this particular case of the 2 full years. And the question is, where is your dungeon? When are your 2 full years? I do not know where you are, but perhaps you are in this situation where you long to be seen, heard, valued, recognized, admired, respected, celebrated. But instead, you find yourself living a life of pain, in vain, and it's driving you insane. And watch out for this one, you get a lot of gain. So, what would it be in your case? I do not know. But here is this particular concept which you hear from motivational speakers and self-help people, but actually the scriptures have that covered way, way back. It is this principle. You cannot choose your circumstances, but you can choose your response to those circumstances. Joseph had no choice but to be in a dungeon. Actually, he chose to remain in the dungeon. He could have escaped, remember? But he chose his responses to be better instead of bitter. And then that's how it was for 2 full years. We'll elaborate that more. And then something happened. Something wonderful. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. Now, this is the NIV version. I like how the ESV made it. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed. Now, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. Those of you who are, please correct me if I'm wrong. But the word translated as after, mikesh, had the meaning of at the end of. And a little word study would reveal that it's connected to a Hebrew root word that says cut off. It means that at the end of something definite, the completion of a specific point of time. It's not like God is waiting for some flexible timeline. There's a delay, so we extend the deadline a little bit more, push the boundaries, push the goalposts. No, it's something definite. When it's here, it's here. And in context, it talks about a specific critical turning point in God's sovereign plan where he activates the redemption of Joseph, his family, and the whole world. Wow. And that gives you the first principle. I would write in your sermon notes, number 1, I need to remember that God is in control of the timetable. I need to know there's a timetable in the first place, that God knows the start and stop of my dungeon. That's important. And if you were to read the scripture, you'll see timetables all over the place. Let me give you 3 examples. Israel. You know the story of Exodus, but you know that way, way, way before that, in Genesis chapter 15, God told Abraham, know for certain that for 400 years, your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, Egypt, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. It is not as if that God was taken by surprise that, hey, Israel was enslaved by the other Pharaoh. And then, hey, what do I do then? Wait, okay. Oh, there's Moses, let me use him. No, everything was preordained. And then you have the story of Exodus. The second, again, Israel. You know what happened, right? Israel conquered the promised land. They had a covenant with God. Long story short, they kept on violating that covenant. Fast forward, God had to chastise them, technically the nation of Judah, and how? Babylonian captivity. So, how long would the Israelites be under the Babylonian thumb? 70 years. This whole country will become a desolate wasteland, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. But when those 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and his nation, the land of the Babylonians, for their guilt, and will make it desolate forever. God knows how to chastise Israel and punish those who conquered or oppressed them. Last, Jesus himself. As you would look at the Gospels, you'll have this sense of this hour or his hour. It's the hour when he was betrayed and on the way to the cross. So before that, at this day, the religious leaders tried to seize Jesus, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. John chapter 7, verse 30. Then, at the Last Supper, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. John chapter 13, verse 1. Then, finally, at Gethsemane. Okay, you know Jesus, agonizing prayer, sweats of blood, and then the disciples, out of sorrow and sleepiness, they went asleep. And then Jesus told them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough! The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Mark chapter 14, 41. And who came in? Judas, leading a crowd with spears, swords, and clubs. Then the kiss. And so you have the idea that everything went on a timetable, including you and me. And that's where now you begin to wonder, why a timetable in the first place? Couldn't God just give us the blessing, even let's say ahead of schedule, retro, advance, discounted? I don't know. But here is one of the things my mentor said. My mentor said something like this, Nelson, if you're not ready for God's blessing, and you insist on getting it, you will ruin that blessing. And I had my own 2 years when I was jobless and broke. My savings went down, my self-esteem went down to negative, and I was pleading for God for a job because I never felt so useless, so helpless in my life. Then I saw one ad, okay, in the newspaper. Remember those days? One ad in the newspaper, I responded, sent my resume, and then I got a phone call from the HR director. Let's call it Company X. And I got to go to the interview. And it was the CEO of that Company X, not HR, entry level, not some exam, not some middle panel, the CEO himself. And so I think we established good rapport. And then I told her I want to work for this particular division of his company. And it ended with the CEO telling me, okay, I'll talk to that division. Whoa! Good sign. Finally, I'll get a job. Not only that, Company X, one of the biggest known conglomerates in the country. If I tell you the name, you'll know it. If I tell you the CEO's name, you'll know it too. And then I waited for 1 week, nothing. Second week, nothing. Then I called up the HR director, and he said, Nelson, I'm sorry you did not make the cut. And my world collapsed. And it was a seismic shock to my faith, because I was pleading to God for that job and nothing. And for quite some time, I was in a spiritual funk. Long story short, after the 2 full years, I got another job, Company Y. And Company Y is a competitor of Company X. Go figure. Yeah, okay, God has a sense of humor. And then another twist is that my boss used to work for Company X. So I told my boss, I told him the story of my interview with the CEO of Company X. Then I asked my boss, had I been hired by Company X, would I be happy there? And my boss took one look at me and asked me 2 questions. Nelson, are you the type who would play office politics? You'll always be tooting your own horn, claw your way up, and maybe fend off those who like to tear you down. No, that's not my personality. Okay, question number 2. Would you be willing to work long hours, even weekends and holidays, to the point that even your family will not recognize you? No, work-life integration. And then my boss said, Nelson, you'll not be happy with Company X. Then heaven opened. I had my epiphany. God was protecting me. Because if I had gotten that job before I was ready, I would have ruined my career and myself. Again, long story short, when I went to Company Y, my boss elevated me to handle 2 factories for the company. Hardly overnight success. But that gives you the clue. Why are we in this particular timetable where you long for it to end, you don't even know when it's going to end? Perhaps God is protecting you against yourself. And you have to wait until somehow you're ready. In fact, that's also one of the reflections for Lucy and myself. Lucy and I met late. We were in our 40s when we met and got married. And then we would have this discussion, how come God didn't introduce us to each other earlier? It could have been 20 years earlier, 20 years more married bliss. And then I gave her this concept. The concept is we must be convinced that God not only chooses the blessing, but the timing of the blessing. I'll be blunt. You do not want to know me, let alone marry me in my 20s and 30s. I'll only ruin you and me. Okay, so that's where God has perfect timing. And that gives you number 2 in your sermon notes. We must be convinced that dungeon time is preparation time. I need to see dungeon time as preparation time. God can give you the blessing, no problem. Snap of his fingers. Question is, are you ready? And you'll see the pattern in Scripture. Before God unleashes the blessing, he first prepares the blessed. And then, can you imagine what would happen if Joseph chose the dark side? He would say, after all the things I've done, all the goody I think I did, helping people, doing my best, keeping my sexual purity, this is what I get. No more. Okay, I'm going to break out of this joint, and just you wait, Mrs. Potiphar. And then tomorrow, you'll see this headline. Trusted inmate engineers jailbreak. Okay? And then we'll talk about the scandal of this prisoner, only known as Joseph, used to be with Potiphar and accused of attempted rape, escaping under the cover of darkness. And then you'll go to CNN, Cairo News Network. the whole country is in lockdown. They'll have checkpoints, will check every chariot, they'll go to the Coast Guard, and they'll check every barge through the River Nile. Big manhunt. No. You will surmise that Joseph remained in the dungeon. And you will notice that he still remained faithful. How do you know? The text doesn't say 2 full years. That's all it said. But you can surmise through the clues by observing Joseph after those 2 full years. Remember, afterwards, Pharaoh had a dream, actually 2 dreams, and then nobody in his court, the wise men and the magicians, can interpret those dreams. And suddenly, the cupbearer, I just remembered. Okay. Then he told Pharaoh about this guy in the prison who interpreted his dream. So Pharaoh summoned him right away. Okay. So Joseph, had to shave, put on clothes because this was the first executive interview. Okay. And then Joseph came in, and then notice the first sign of his being faithful in prison. Number 1 is that he remained spiritually fresh. His spiritual vitality was the same. Notice what Pharaoh told Joseph. I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And then Joseph said, I cannot do it. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Do you remember before the 2 years what Joseph told the cupbearer? Are not dreams belonging to God? Tell me the dream. Same wavelength. Because if you have deteriorated spiritually, chances are your response will also be deteriorated. But no, still fresh. And notice Joseph kept on pointing people to God, not on himself. The second one would be that he had a sharp response. After knowing the dream, Joseph immediately interpreted it, not only with precise details, but also with boldness. Okay? So then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Not Pharaoh, that's a tough one. Let me talk to ChatGPT. Okay? Now, it's very precise, very immediate. It was a sharp response. And perhaps this is the one I like best. He gave strategic wisdom. He made solid recommendations. Okay, after interpreting the dream, remember, 7 years of abundance followed by 7 terrible years of famine. And Joseph's action plan, Pharaoh, here's what you do. You collect and you store, you hoard all those grain, all those food during the years of plenty, so that then when the 7 years of terrible famine comes in, you have food. And that was an amazing recommendation. Guys, if you are, let's say, a business owner or a manager, don't you hate it when a direct report comes to you with data, numbers, and then, boss, it's up to you. You interpret the data. But don't you love it when you have a subordinate and says, boss, we have a problem, but here's the solution. Yeah, that's Joseph. And so you have this particular wisdom wherein Joseph went the extra mile, not just the meaning of the dream, but what to do next, the next steps. And here's something interesting. You don't see Joseph, now let Pharaoh look for a discerning man and wise man and put him in charge of all of Egypt. No, he did not point the finger on himself. It was not self-serving. He still left it to God. You have a sense, perhaps, that he learned his lesson on asking the cupbearer. He asked for political favor, nothing happened, so maybe I'll leave it to God. And so it was a neutral recommendation, and perhaps, just perhaps, Pharaoh was impressed, not just by the quality of the interpretation or the quality of the recommendation, but he saw Joseph safe, no hidden agenda, not out to promote himself. And therefore, Pharaoh said, Joseph, you're the one. You're going to be second in command of all Egypt. Nothing will move unless you say so. Only with respect to the throne, I'm your superior. Overnight success at last, after 13 years. But here's the question. You know now the elevated position, the enormous job he had to do, you think that he could have done so while still remaining as a shepherd way back in Genesis chapter 37? Imagine the skills that he would need to have. Skills like this one. You think Joseph had no LinkedIn? Okay, that's what, yes, it's LinkedIn, okay? Straight from the archaeologists. Okay, and you can imagine the skills that he would need to have. Yeah, there's dream interpretation, good governance, business acumen, strategic planning, but don't forget, remember storing the food, good warehousing practices. Yeah, those engineers here, those who are into logistics, and by the way, supply chain, you know the drill. Operation excellence, and yes, later on he has to sell those grain in return for something else, high-stakes negotiation. And by the way, you know that later on, Joseph increased Pharaoh's wealth and influence. And that's why I love this particular quotation. It is attributed to A.B. Simpson. God is preparing his heroes, and when the opportunity comes, he can fit them into their place in a moment, and the world will wonder where they came from. If you are in this dungeon 2 full years, you don't even know if it's 2 years or more, it's like being in like a quiver inside somebody's bow. And then when the archer takes you out, puts you in the bullseye, that's the reason why you're there. Think of it as you are now in a preparation stage so that when the right time comes, the world will wonder where it came from. And so you know what happened next, right? True enough, the famine happened. Then not only Egypt, but also other people outside of Egypt had to beg, plead, buy, even sell themselves for the food. And later, you know who came next. The brothers. And then if you're Joseph, now I got them at my mercy. I got them where I wanted. Okay, but no, you'll notice what he said towards the end. By that time, Joseph had this mindset. Okay, Genesis chapter 50, verses 19-20. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I'll put number 3 in your sermon notes. I need to trust God has a higher purpose for my 2 full years. There's a higher purpose for your 2 full years. Many times we struggle in our dungeon because we have our purpose, our agenda, our aspirations. But the most resilient people I know are those who have purposes beyond themselves. And what could be more beyond than God himself? It is the principle that you are an important part of God's grand plan, even though you don't see the whole picture for now. It is like being this chess piece in the hands of a grandmaster. And if you'll see the chess game being played out, you may think, why is the chess master doing this? It's a mistake. He lost pieces, but it was all planned out so that he'll have this amazing checkmate towards the end. That's us. And that's why we have to believe that there's some grand plan, and we are his instruments. And so after having all these 3 principles, number 1, God has a timetable for a dungeon. Number 2, God is preparing you in the dungeon time. Number 3 is that God has a higher purpose in your dungeon. So what? And here are 3 suggested applications starting tomorrow, Monday, when you go back, let's say, to your dungeon. Number 1, I didn't expect that response. I must have struck a chord or something, huh? Okay, all right. So number 1, give your best gifts now. When you're in a dungeon, when things are not going your way, it's not exactly the job you want, the people you like to work with, it's easy to just, coast along, go through the motions, do things half-heartedly, que sera, sera. But no, the challenge is to continue being faithful to God and give your best. It's not like, I'll give my best when things are perfect. No, because that day may never come. Rather, give your best now. I like this particular quotation. I saw this way, way back, and I love it. I preserve it. It's by Todd Lake, an American pastor. He said, each day is more than a stepping stone to some imagined future when we will finally be able to use our gifts fully and be recognized for our accomplishments. That is a recipe for frustrating ourselves and for frustrating God's desire to work through us right where we are. Today is the day to bring all our creativity to bear on whatever clear good we can do in the high calling of our daily work. I think you've seen and heard a lot of speeches, books that says, oh, you must do something extraordinary. Go change the world. Follow your passion. But chances are, you and I are living ordinary lives, doing ordinary work with ordinary rewards. But no, the challenge is to do those ordinary things with an extraordinary spirit. And later, Paul should say the same thing. He wrote, whatever you do, do at it, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you're serving. Okay? The higher purpose of your work, the Lord Christ you're serving. And by the way, have you noticed? It says whatever you do. Okay? The pastor, as well as the plumber, the bishop, as well as the businessman, the missionary, as well as the manager, whatever you do, whatever you find your hand working on tomorrow, give your best, work it with all your heart, because it is really not just your boss, but the ultimate boss you're serving. I have another mentor, and that's why I love you guys having mentors. During the discipleship journey, will you have people helping you in the life groups and all that? But I have another mentor who says something like this. Nelson, when you go back to your day job and you're writing a report, of course you have this report, submit to your boss. Imagine a CC, Jesus Christ. Yeah, because ultimately that's what it's going to be. You do your work, and ultimately it'll reach all the way to Jesus Christ. And that gives you the subconscious operating system to be excellent in whatever you do. And this is where you give your best. Meantime, you keep yourself spiritually fresh. Keep your spiritual vitality. What we talk about with Joseph. Why? When things are not going your way and things seem so dry, you feel dry, you'll be skipping your quiet time, your prayer, your fellowship, your life group, and then you'll wither. The challenge is that you remain spiritually fresh, and I love this particular passage. Okay, remember this book? Okay, UCM was promoting it. It's the Daily Devotional Truth for Life by Alistair Begg. And this entry spoke to me as I was making this message. Most, if not all, know what it is to wake up with the thought that life isn't anywhere near what we would like it to be. One helpful place to start is by asking God for His protection from three powerful sources of spiritual trouble: the silent killers of bitterness, resentment, and self-pity. So, rather, use these moments to learn the value of leaving your heart's questions and the situations you don't understand in God's care, which, after all, is exactly where they belong. And this is where we need to continue trusting in God. Yeah, you go to seek Him in prayer, you pour through His Word, you journal. That's what I did in my 2 full years, to keep yourself spiritually fresh. And if you want to have some kind of encouragement, look at this passage from Jeremiah. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in Him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. Now get this. It does not fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. It will also be in your 2 full years, you will always bear fruit. Your leaves will always be green. And now, by the way, okay, I trust God. Can you give me what specific trust? And last application, you must trust God to vindicate you. Trust God to vindicate you. Okay? You know the story that when, let's say, the brothers, okay, they went to Egypt to buy grain. There's the famine going on. Then when they faced Joseph, they did not recognize it was Joseph, but Joseph knew it was them. And what happened? They bowed down. What did the scripture say? So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he, Joseph, remembered his dreams about them. Remember those dreams way back in Genesis 37? Now it's fulfilled. He was at last vindicated. Then later, Jacob, the patriarch, died. And then now the brothers are really, really worried because now Joseph really doesn't have it. Okay? And so remember, they bowed down, threw themselves down at his mercy. We are your slaves. And that's where you remember Joseph said, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. And I will take good care of you. Sheer grace, lavish grace. And you can see that the spiritual vitality, the acid test, is how you treat your enemies. There is no evidence that Joseph went back to Potiphar's wife. Can you imagine? Potiphar's wife turns on the TV, Cairo News Network. Breaking news. Pharaoh has appointed Joseph as the vice pharaoh. And Potiphar's wife would look at her, that's the slave, that's the slave. And then she shrieked, and then Potiphar came in, what's wrong? And Potiphar's wife tells him the story, and Potiphar says, you did what? And then there's a knock on the door, and then it was Joseph's chief of staff. And the chief of staff tells the two, Joseph would like to have a word with you. Okay, but there's no evidence that he went back against Potiphar's wife. Then look at the cupbearer, 2 full years, remember? Joseph could have said, Pharaoh, you gave me full command, right? Let me talk to you about that guy, that cupbearer. I'd like you to replace him, and I have some candidates here. Here are the resumes. No, nothing like that. And of course, you do not see Joseph saying, yeah, you know, good brothers, now that dad is gone, I'm going to make you pay. Nothing like that also. And so that's where you see this particular fantastic story being reflected in the life of Jesus. Okay? Right? So have you noticed that you don't really know what happened to Jesus in his first 30 years? We know that he entered public ministry when he was about age 30. Aside from this little snippet in the Gospel of Luke, what do we know about him? As a carpenter, making those chairs, tables, cabinets, day in and day out, sewing, hammering, pok, 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 and all that, and probably even dealing with difficult customers. Okay, you don't know. And probably that's what he was doing. I don't know, he's thinking, when will I finally be having this healing of people making miracles? No, I still have to. Okay, things like that. The other one is that he also had his share of frustration. Remember, finally, when he was into public ministry, he had his share of frustration. He would preach his heart out. He would heal people left and right. And what did he get? The religious leaders, they resisted him, mocked him, slandered against him, and finally conspired to kill him. And not only that, what about his disciples? Okay? These are not exactly the sharpest people in the bunch. Do you remember Jesus would say, where is your faith? Or do you still not understand? And of course, probably what would be the most hurtful of all? Judas denied him. Peter denied him. Judas betrayed him. Peter denied him. And when he was arrested, everybody abandoned him. Speaking of which, the last sort of dungeon was the unfairness of it all. Just like Joseph, he was sold also by Judas for the 30 shekels. And then he was mocked, flogged, spat upon, crucified. And yet, what happened? Similar to Joseph, the people, the religious leaders meant it for evil, but God overturned it for our good. The leaders plotted evil in crucifying the innocent Son of God, but God ordained it for good, the salvation of many. Peter would say so to the Jewish crowd in Acts chapter 2, verse 23. Jesus was handed over to you by God's deliberate plan and forbearance, and you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross. And how did Jesus respond to all this injustice, all this agony? When they hurled their insults at Jesus, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. When you feel that an injustice was done to you, I can find your recourse, etc., but ultimately, you trust God to vindicate you. God vindicated Joseph, and God vindicated Jesus. Jesus died, rose from the dead, ascended to heaven, seated at the right hand of the Father, and will come back to judge the living and the dead. And every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord over all. There is this particular notion which you may have heard also. When you know your why, you can endure anyhow. The concept is like this. As long as you know the reason why you're suffering, you can bear with any suffering. But let me raise it one level higher. It's the Christian principle. When you know your who, when you know the God who has a timetable for you, when you know the God who is preparing you, when you know the God who has a higher purpose, when you know the God who will vindicate you, you can endure any suffering, even those dungeons and those 2 years. Where's the justice, you may ask? In the end, God will make everything right. Everything. Here is the sermon in one shot. Okay, so if you are in a situation where you're in pain, in vain, it's driving you insane, here's your gain. That when you're living in obscurity, frustration, unfairness, remember the lessons. 1, God is in control of the timetable. 2, dungeon times are preparation times. 3, there is a higher purpose for your 2 full years. And what do you do now? Give your best gifts now. Keep your spiritual vitality, and you trust God to vindicate you. Heed these lessons well. Why? Because you'll never know. Somewhere out there, another Pharaoh begins to dream. Shalom to you.